Hello and welcome to Build and Thrive, a podcast that is dedicated to improving the health and happiness of the construction industry. I'm Jenny, your host. Before we get started, just want to say a big thank you to GKR Scaffolding, who are our sponsors for the first series. Today's guest is Clare Forshaw. So I have known Clare, I reckon it must be over 10 years. She is definitely somebody who's been well respected in the world of occupational health and particularly in construction. So Clare, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today. Welcome to Build and Thrive.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. We know we like to have a chat, don't we?
We do, and we've had our early chats before we've got started about not talking for too long and going off on our massive tangents that we can do. But I'm sure it'll be really inspiring and useful to the listeners. So Clare, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, how you got to where you are, and your experience in construction.
Yeah, so I am a bit of a mixed bag, I suppose. I've been knocking around for quite some time, so a lot of people might know me or recognise my name or my face at least. So I started my career in health and safety executive, so within the regulator. So did a number of roles within HSE and found myself on the health side of health and safety, and that's really where my passion for health came from. So initially I was working with the medical unit as it was, working with policy, setting standards on health surveillance, as well as competencies for occupational health provision and standards, and then moved more into occupational hygiene, where I did a master's through my work with HSE and really got a passion for the preventative element of health whilst understanding the role of occupational health there as well. So that's when I kind of moved to the construction sector, which was really exciting time. It was around the time the Leslie Rushton occupational cancer bed report was published. So it was a time when the industry really got some hard facts and statistics about the impact construction work was having on the health of its people, and I think that was a real turning point for the industry to own the prevention element of not creating health burden for its workers of the future. I think that was a really shocking report for the industry, where we found that construction bore over 40% of occupational cancers in the country as a sector. So I guess that's where we really started to make an impact, working closely with the industry on looking at those kind of exposures and risks and what more we could do about it, really.
Absolutely. And tell us a little bit about where you are now, but also your role in the Hearing Conservation Association.
Yeah, so currently I'm working for the RSSB, which is the Rail Safety Standards Board. So looking to support the rail sector now, using a lot of the learning and experience that I've got from working closely with the construction sector. I'm also a director for the UK Hearing Conservation Association, and we've been in existence now for 6 years next month, actually. So we've been around for a short time. That, again, was really, just as I left HSE, it gave me an opportunity to work more closely with others on kind of extracurricular interests. We had a summit 6 years ago where we brought a lot of passionate, interested individuals together who had been working on noise and hearing health for many years and had been frustrated at the lack of progress and attention given to the subject. And we decided, based on the model from the US, where they've got a National Hearing Conservation Association, to emulate that as a multidisciplinary, independent approach to raising awareness and providing best practice guidance in that area.
Yeah, I think that the bringing different people together and different expertise definitely adds a lot of value in this. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about noise more generally. So, I mean, it's obviously something that we expect quite a lot in construction. It's almost just a given that we're going to have a noisy environment. But I mean, from your experience, why do you think we're still struggling to manage it and it's still such a predominant health issue that many of our workers face?
Yeah, so I guess, having been working on the health side of health and safety for all of my career, really, and having that kind of battle alongside safety to say, health is just as important. We have health and safety regulations, health impacts on safety, safety can impact on health, to kind of elevate the role of health and the importance of health. And we're 100 times more likely to die from a health issue than we are from an accident. Having the topic of noise, which just initially I didn't choose that topic. It's not, I wouldn't say I'm a total expert in the area, but I've become more knowledgeable because everywhere I went, somebody seemed to say, oh, you can do noise, Claire. So it kind of just became my topic by accident. What I found was, we needed to take health more seriously, but actually noise seemed to be the kind of poorest relation of health issues. We were elevating the importance of respiratory risks, of musculoskeletal problems, of mental health conditions, all extremely pertinent and serious issues for our people. And yet noise, I think because it's been around for so long, it's one of our oldest known industrial diseases. It first recorded in the 1800s as a health risk and the impact it has on hearing health. And we've been doing audiometry checks since 1920 or something. The same thing for a long time. We've had legislation from back in the 80s and guidance before that on noise and hearing, that we've kind of got used to it being just one of those tick box issues. Yeah, we do noise. We've got noise measurements. We do health surveillance. We do hearing checks, whatever. We've got that boxed off. And there's been no real innovation or progress. And we're certainly not seeing any impact on numbers and statistics around noise exposure or hearing loss impact either. So we really need to do more in terms of making this a kind of serious health subject for us to talk about.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The motivation about if someone's going to die from a work-related cancer, it's a bit of an easier sell, but it doesn't seem to get the same traction. But then when you meet people that have got tinnitus and have got noise-induced hearing loss, you hear how debilitating it is for them. And actually you think, right, but these people need to be standing in front of their peers and telling everyone, actually, this is a more important issue for us to address. I definitely don't feel we do enough, even as health and safety professionals, to raise the importance of it.
Yeah, I mean, quite often people have said to me in previous roles, maybe, the seriousness maybe of noise and hearing has been, well, it doesn't kill anybody. But, working in the HSE and closely with the construction sector and seeing the accidents and the impact of not being able to hear properly, whether that's due to audibility issues around our specifications of hearing protection, or whether it's people maybe have a hearing loss or there's other noise around that they can't hear properly and they end up having an accident, the number of fatalities that we can link to that kind of audibility and noise issues. So actually noise does kill people indirectly, and us not having a grip on that risk. And actually with the HSE have got a current noise inspection programme going on at the moment, and one of the biggest concerns coming out of that around the hearing protection management is very few employers are actually considering audibility in their risk assessment and their specification of hearing protection. So massive challenges there, where again we're trying to do the right thing. We're trying to give people the best high protection value in the hearing protection, but that could actually be causing more problems and creating a big safety risk.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I know sometimes when I talk with some of my clients about the motivation to try and do things, putting the safety spin on things. If you do this, it might reduce accidents. Let's give people better food to eat because it might make them more alert and reduce accidents. That does seem to be more of a motivating angle to take than others. So yeah, definitely something for people to think about. The other thing we like to do on the podcast, Claire, is that we talk about evidence-based practice and using research and statistics just to make sure we're making decisions and driving what we're doing based on actual facts and evidence. So have you got any kind of interesting stats that you want to share with listeners, particularly around noise?
Well, obviously there's lots I could select from. In the fact that noise-induced hearing loss is still by far the largest numbers who are successful for claims for industrial injuries benefit. So although that's not borne directly by the employer, it's worth flagging that it beats any other occupational disease tenfold in terms of the numbers who are successful, and it's quite a high bar to get industrial injuries benefit from the government. Right. So noise-induced hearing loss is quite high there. But like you said about our motivation around some of these health topics and what moves people to action and taking it seriously, I think the emerging evidence on the link to cognitive decline and particularly dementia risk has been really significant from our perspective in this area of trying to raise awareness in getting people's attention. The statistics or the work particularly published in the Lancet a few years ago showed that even with mild hearing loss, you're twice as likely to suffer from early onset of dementia in later life than without a hearing loss. It's been deemed the biggest, what they call modifiable factor, so the biggest risk factor that we can actually influence and prevent in terms of risk of dementia onset. So if we can keep people's hearing health in good shape, if you like, we are also supporting better cognitive outcomes in the future. I often use I like to use analogies because it helps me picture issues, but you said about we don't take hearing loss seriously, and I always say, well, if you ever had a granddad, you used to say, the grumpy old granddad would sit in the corner and he wouldn't engage with his family, and he'd, sit in front of the television with it turned up loudly, and probably that grumpy old granddad had hearing loss, and I probably felt embarrassed trying to say, excuse me, probably, switched himself off from that kind of social interaction, all down to the hearing loss decline and feeling part of that social setting, which, if we can relate to it in that way, you can sort of make sense of how serious it really can be and how isolating hearing loss can be for individuals.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and definitely a story to tell about, trying to relate people to dementia. I think a lot of people can connect with that. There's so many family members that we've got there. So hopefully that becomes more of a motivation for organisations to raise awareness and to do more about it. And one of the things that I find really interesting, I'm just interested to get your perspective of, is I hear about lots of challenges now we have with generations. And so we're used to, as you get older, potentially we expect your hearing to get worse. But then equally, as you're younger, we know that lots more people are wearing headphones, and people are coming into work from being exposed to loud music for long periods of time with kind of hearing damage already. So what's kind of your experience around that, and what's been done to try and address it?
Yeah, again, it's this kind of wider societal challenge of elevating the importance of our hearing health. And I think it is, and it should be, a concern for workplaces. Although evidence in the UK is limited, there's lots of evidence from the US in terms of the prevalence of noise-induced hearing loss. And anecdotally, I hear a lot of occupational health providers telling me shocking tales of new workers at 18 years of age with serious and significant hearing loss already. I don't think you can walk down the street or get on the tube or any other public transport without seeing people plugged into their headphones. And we did some work testing listening levels, and people are typically listening around 95 to 100 decibels. So they're getting their whole day noise dose in about 15 to 20 minutes. So you imagine being on the tube for 10, 15 minutes, they've already had their noise dose. Some evidence, I guess, from the Ofcom reports, which estimate that adults in the UK are consuming around 5 hours of audible content a day. So again, if we're listening around 90 dB for 5 hours a day, you can imagine the kind of dose that people are getting before they even get to work. So the challenge around noise levels in work are probably reducing. We think we're turning things down a little bit, like background exposure that people are having. It's still going to put people at serious risk, and maybe we should look at some of the legal action levels and think, are they still appropriate to our public consumption of audible content these days, and are we really protecting people and their health for the future with those action levels?
Yeah, I mean, it just highlights why organisations need to get on top of this so much more, because if you're saying it's the number one reason for people to make some claims, then if you're inheriting those problems, your systems and your processes have got to be really, really robust to make sure that they're ensuring they can demonstrate that they've done what they can to protect people. Lots to be thinking about. And I suppose you're kind of at the forefront of innovations and things that are happening out in the industry, but in the conservation space. So is there anything that you're seeing that's really exciting you, or anything that's coming to the market that you think is going to make a big difference in the world of noise management?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of new and innovative products and approaches. And I think that for me is probably the most exciting. Part of that is that it's not any one particular product or service out there. I think the fact that there is innovation is great, because I think, as I said before, the topic of noise and our approach to noise has been so staid and stale and the same as we've always done it. We'll continue to make the same mistakes. Collect lots of data, but collect all that guilty knowledge. And I think that I'm sure there are lots of other examples in health risk management where we've fallen into that trap previously. So I wouldn't say any one new solution or innovation is going to give us the silver bullet to solve the problem for us. But I think using that innovation, looking at the solutions, looking at the products and services that are coming onto the market, and really thinking about how is that going to help me? How is that going to change my dynamic? How is that going to improve the profile, or give me better insights, or help me engage with workers, or help me elevate this to board levels as an issue, or help me get investment to change a process or to redesign something where we're going to make real impact. That's what I would suggest. But yeah, there's loads of excitement. Just the fact that people are innovating in this area gives me, kind of warm, fuzzy feeling. We're moving forward, and we're progressing in our maturity and our interest in the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose for lots of organisations, investing in new innovations isn't necessarily going to be, in noise management, it's probably not going to be at the forefront of their agenda. What would you kind of recommend for organisations that don't want to spend loads of money but just want to make sure they're doing the right things, what's some key takeaways that you think are fundamental to that?
Looking at probably what you do spend and invest on this topic, because people spend a lot of money, a lot of resources quantifying a problem when they already know they have a problem. And I'm sure that resource and that investment could be better spent elsewhere. If you know you've got a noisy task, part of the job, or a noisy phase of the project, you don't need to quantify that to an exponential number to be assured that there's a problem. Similarly, people spend a lot of money on hearing protection that isn't used or isn't used properly. We know that the evidence shows us that it isn't worn all the time, that it can be a fairly ineffective protection against the exposure. So things like looking at the noise source, just spend some time walking around, listening, and finding out which activities, tools, whatever it might be, is actually causing the most noise and the most challenge for people. And then think about the solutions there, whether it's replacement, maintenance, new tools or new processes. Sometimes some really simple things can make a big difference. And we can use enclosures for noisy tasks, even though you're around drill bits. There's loads we can, and peckers. There's loads of things that we can do. And I think looking more at the source of the problem and the transmission of where that noise is going to travel and how it's going to affect the people in the environment around them is much more effective and impactful than quantifying a problem or throwing PPE at the issue either.
Yeah, and I think, taking that time and space to actually look at what's causing it. I suppose one of the experiences I've had only just in last month, one of my clients was a contractor. When they did all of their noise risk assessments, their actual noise exposure was well below the upper exposure action value. We did some noise monitoring, but actually then all of them were above the upper exposure action value because of all of the contractors that were working around them. And we had a big debate with the principal contractor to say, right, well, actually, whose responsibility is there? They've got the right things in place, but actually their workers are still significantly exposed. So, what's your reflections on, particularly the role of the principal contractor in this space?
Yeah, I think that's really important for construction, and being a sad geek and regulator by background, people might have heard me say before, I think the CDM regulations are a fantastic piece of legislation. Yeah, you heard it here.
I'm a big fan.
What a cheesy person. Because it gives the framework for everybody playing their part. And that's often missed. And, we think about our legal responsibilities and our duties. And yes, as the employer, as the duty holder, it's your risk to manage, it's your people to protect. We do work in, particularly in construction, in dynamic environments where things are changing. And that role of principal contractor in overseeing all that profile and putting the picture together and planning the works better. So if certain contractors don't need to be on site when there's particularly heavy, activities creating lots of noise, plan the work so those people aren't there. Sometimes you see construction projects and you see people standing around right next to some really ridiculously noisy activity and they're just waiting to get in and do their part of the works. And, if they don't need to be there, why are they being exposed? It's kind of like wasted exposure, if you like. I think that the principal contractor is similar to the kind of manual handling challenge in terms of planning for the works, real opportunity to support, because individual contractors will only see their bit of the risk, and so in that dynamic environment the exposure is much likely to be contractors and other works than their own.
Well, we had this conversation about speaking up. We talk about if you see something unsafe, stop work, and people are empowered to do that. But we spoke to some of the workers at the time, like, would you do the same thing for noise? And they're like, well, no. So it's definitely a bit of a culture shift to change that mindset. And even just the mobile phone apps now, if you're in an environment, sometimes using those, as much as they're not necessarily a validated way of doing a detailed noise exposure, but they give you a good indication to say, right, well, how do we manage this situation that we're here? And obviously things change, as you said, so frequently in construction. You need to be able to have a way to be able to manage things hour by hour rather than once a week or once a month or yearly probably. Lots of work to do there. So I suppose thinking about the role of the Hearing Conservation Association and what you're doing, what's the future look like there? What you're hoping to achieve with that?
So there's still, as always, so much to do. So much work we really can achieve in doing this. I guess one of the biggest things we need to continue to progress is that kind of communication and training. There's a big call out there for learning materials and content independent, and there's not much out there. So we want to do a bit of work in producing some training and education materials focused at this stage around that kind of hearing protection management, because whether we like it or not, it is the default position, and we get it so wrong so many times. Where we can, educate around managing hearing protection and what a good hearing protection management program looks like, including the element of fit testing, because again, if we're familiar with respiratory risks and the use of close-fitting face masks and the need for fit testing, because without that they are useless pretty much, or we can't demonstrate how useful they are. If we're relying on hearing protection as our final protection against the noise, then we need to make sure it's being worn all the time and it fits properly for that individual where that's appropriate. So I guess there's a bit of work around that and getting the working groups moving again. So we've got a number of special interest groups in noise and hearing conservation. Continue to work across the disciplines to raise the profile, to improve our health surveillance, to improve our hierarchy of control approach, and work with others to educate people about why the hearing is really important, worth protecting.
Brilliant, thanks Claire. I mean, you're obviously doing some amazing work, and we'll make sure we have all the links to work that you're doing so people can find out a little bit more. I know I get the invites to your conferences. There's always good things coming out of it. It's definitely something for people to keep an eye on. And before we go, I just wanted to, one of the other features that we ask our guests is to try and understand a little bit more about you as a person. So we talk about health and wellbeing, what we do in our roles, but I just was interested, what's your kind of tips and any tricks that you do to look after yourself that make you happy and healthy?
Okay. Confessions of a health and wellbeing specialist, if you like. It's always the challenge of walking the talk. I think we're so good at telling people what to do and what they should do, and then can be so guilty of falling foul of, but that doesn't apply to me. So I think one of my sort of ambition, I guess, is to make sure and to challenge myself to say, are you walking the talk here? Are you doing what you're telling and advising other people in terms of looking after your health and wellbeing? But generally, I do try to get outside as much as possible. And exercise, so that's a good release for me. That works for me. Whatever that works for other people in terms of just having that kind of switch off your brain time. But yeah, I think us all making sure we're doing what we tell other people to do, and constantly sense checking. I mean, we get it on construction sites. We get these if in the area of noise, we get these leadership visits, and they walk through the workplace without their hearing protection on, and you think, oh, right, do they not have, do they not hear noise? Do they not get affected? Are they very special? And although they probably aren't exposed for a long time, it's just about demonstrating that you take that issue as seriously as you expect everybody else to.
Yeah. I do feel sometimes when you say you work in health and wellbeing, there's this expectation that you are super fit, super healthy, you do everything perfectly, and you know the answers to everything. And if only we would be. Yes, exactly. Brilliant. Well, thank you, Claire. Thanks so much for sharing your insights. I know that you've done some amazing work and the industry is really grateful for the awareness that you've been bringing. So we look forward to seeing everything else, the work that you do. So before we go, I just want to say again, big thank you to our sponsors, GKR Scaffolding. If you've enjoyed the podcast, do remember to like and subscribe. If you've got any feedback on today, or if there's anything else that you'd like to hear more of, please do get in touch. We're still learning and evolving what we're doing. So you'll find all the details in the show notes, and we'll look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you. Thank you, Claire.